I work from home and live in an apartment. I have my computer set up in the corner of my living room, and that's where I sit all day during the week. My apartment building is pretty new and fairly nice. It's not at all some cheap dump or anything like that. It's located in a pretty populated area about 10 minutes outside of the city. But there was this one time when something really crazy happened. So it was a weekday and I was at work. Like always, I was sitting at my desk in the living room and on my computer. I don't recall the exact time, but I'm guessing at like 1 p.m. or so, I heard a knock on my door. It was unusual for anybody to be at my door, but living in a large apartment building is not a crazy thought, especially with it being right in the middle of the day. I got up from my desk and then walked over to the door. Before opening it, I first looked out of the peephole. When I did, I saw that there were 2 men standing there wearing maintenance uniforms. One of them was holding something and the other guy had a toolbox. Realizing they worked for the apartment building, I opened the door. The first guy said that they were there to change the air filters and they would be in and out really quick. I then noticed the thing the other guy was holding was in fact an air filter. I hadn't got any emails about them being changed, but I couldn't remember the last time that they were changed, so I said come on in and let them in. They walked straight for where the air filter was, which was in this small closet that was in my bedroom. The guys said thanks and they would only be a minute. Then I walked back over to my desk and sat down again and got back to work. For maybe a minute total, the guys were in my room. Then I heard them walking out. The door to my apartment opened and shut and they left, and I was busy working, but about a minute later, I got up and walked over to the door and locked it. Then I went back again and continued working. I worked for about another 4 more hours or so until I was off at 5. Then I logged out of everything and was done with work for the day. I didn't really feel like going anywhere and I was planning to just order food later that night. In the meantime, I did some small tasks around the apartment. I unloaded the dishwasher or something like that, and then I remembered that I went to take out the trash. We had a room at the end of the hallway for trash, and there was a chute that you would just dump the garbage down. So I took my garbage bag, left the apartment, and walked down the hallway to the end of it. I dumped the trash and then walked back to my place. I was gone for a total of maybe 1 minute. After walking back to my apartment though, right away I saw someone. There was a random guy in my place. He was just standing in the living room, and as soon as I entered, he saw me. My reaction was to quickly leave. I walked out into the hallway. I remember looking at the door and confirming that this was my place. I didn't accidentally walk into the wrong unit. For some reason, I went back in. I didn't see the guy, but I heard the man running into the other room. I was so confused and creeped out that I just left again and went down to the lobby. There I called the cops. I waited there for them, and when they arrived about 5 minutes later, they went up to my place. After they looked all around, they didn't see anyone. The man was gone. But after answering questions and talking to the police, I realized what happened. The men who entered my apartment to change the air filter did not work there at all. There was no plans for the air filters to be changed that day. That's why I never got an email or anything like that about it. The 2 guys walked in, pretended to change it because I was in the other room. Then one of the men hid in the small closet where the air filter was kept. The other guy left, which I did not see because I was over at my desk where it wasn't really in my view. I assumed that they both left, but really I had just heard one of them leaving. The other guy must have waited around the rest of the day for me to leave. When I walked to take the trash out, he must have thought that I was actually going somewhere and would be gone for a while. Then I think his plan must have been to steal my stuff. That's my best guess. But I walked back in a lot quicker than he expected, ruining his plans. In the end, he just left and did not take anything, probably because he knew I would know who did it. The man thankfully ended up getting caught along with his partner in crime about a week later. They had broken into different apartment buildings pretending to be maintenance workers there as well. It was not their first time doing it. They had all kinds of phony plots to get in people's places. They would steal anything of value. I'm really glad that I got back when I did, and that I wasn't hurt or anything, and I'm glad that the men were caught. This story takes place 2 years ago when I lived alone in this house that I was renting. It was in a quiet neighborhood, but it also had a lot of other houses in it pretty close by. So one night I worked late and arrived back home at about 8 or 9 o'clock p.m. I went inside, and after changing, I decided to cook something to eat. I went into the kitchen, which was located at the back side of the house. There I began to cook, which is something that I enjoy doing when I have the time. As I was right in the middle of this, I heard a knock on my front door. I stopped and wondered who it could be. It was late, so it automatically seemed weird. The only way to find out, though, was to go and look. So I paused my cooking and walked over to the front of the house. There I glanced out of a window to see who it was before I decided to open the door. When I looked, I saw a man standing there at the step. He was wearing a hood that was covering most of his head, so I couldn't really see his face. In fact, it made him look pretty sketchy, because it also wasn't that cold out or raining or anything. And overall, if you want people to open the door for you late at night, maybe don't be hunched over wearing a hood. I thought, I'm not answering, and I walked back over to the kitchen. Literally right as I was walking over there though, I heard the doorbell ring. This was different than before, because before he had knocked. I just ignored it though. I was curious as to what he wanted, but I figured that it wasn't worth trying to find out. I was still fairly new to my neighborhood in that particular area of the city, so I didn't know quite how common crime was, and I thought it best to just leave it alone. I resumed my cooking, and the guy did knock one more time. It was like 2 or 3 minutes after he had rang the doorbell. This I also ignored. I wasn't sure if he knew that I was home or not. I had a few lights on, but not all of them, so it wasn't super bright or anything. It made me think that he did know I was home though, based on how he rang the doorbell right as I was walking away. Still, after the second time he knocked, it stopped, so I figured that he had gone away, and I felt better. In fact, like 5 minutes after I last heard the knocking, I quickly walked back over and looked out the window. He was in fact gone, and then I returned to the kitchen. I went back to cooking, but this only lasted for about 5 minutes, because then, out of nowhere, I saw him again. There was a window in the kitchen that was pretty much right in front of me. It looked out to my tiny backyard, which was fenced in. I suddenly saw this guy appear right on the other side of the window, walking towards it. Then he looked right at me and knocked on the glass. It scared me, and I quickly ran out of the room. This guy was a big problem now. I went into the living room and got out my phone, ready to call the police. I didn't hear the guy knocking again or anything though. So after calming down for a minute, I walked back into the kitchen carefully. I looked to the window and didn't see him. Then I went closer and I looked to the backyard and confirmed that the man was now gone. I went around looking out all the windows, and thankfully he was nowhere to be seen. I was really creeped out though. I still didn't know what the guy wanted, but hoped that he was harmless. Maybe he was just mad that I didn't answer the front door for him. So then he possibly walked into the backyard and knocked on the window just to spite me. Then he left. That was my hope. But what was he doing at my front door in the first place? Either way, I was just glad that he was now gone, and I decided to hold off on calling the cops. I was finally able to finish my cooking after that, with no disturbances. I went into the living room to eat, and then relax and have a nice evening. I hung out in the living room for a while until I got tired. After that, I got ready for bed and went into my bedroom to go to sleep. So I remember that I fell asleep only to randomly wake up in the middle of the night. I woke up and then sat up to check the time. When I saw that it was 1 a.m., I was happy because that meant I could sleep for a long more time. I was about to lay back down to return to sleep, but before I did, I noticed something out the window. It was somebody walking past it. They were not that close to it, but I still saw them. I got up and walked closer to it. They were walking in the backyard. When I looked out of it this time, I saw the same guy. He was back. Now he was walking through my backyard towards the kitchen window again. This time I didn't hesitate, and I took out my phone and I called the police. I told them what was happening, and they said they would send somebody over. I went into the front of my house away from the back and waited. The guy didn't immediately try to break in or anything. I didn't know where he was though, but I didn't want to look. I didn't think it would be a good idea to confront him. The police got there really fast. It was probably like 2 minutes. When they arrived, they found the man still in the backyard. He was caught, but they could not arrest him. Apparently, they just gave him a warning or something. He hadn't broken in, and it couldn't be proven that he was going to, but he was trespassing. He claimed that he was lost, and then I was also told that he thought his friend lived at my place and it was just a mistake. I don't really believe it though, because he saw me in the window earlier that night and then still came back. I personally don't know what his intentions were. I never talked to him, but he was pretty much told to stay away or he would be arrested. After that, thankfully he did. But I still wonder what his plans were and what could have happened had I answered the door for him. This is something that happened when I was 14 years old. Being an only child, I was fairly used to being home alone by myself from time to time. It usually wouldn't happen for very long periods of time though, but every day when I would get home from school for a few hours, I would typically be at home by myself. One Friday in the fall, I went to school and arrived back as normal. My parents were still gone at work, and they would be gone for a lot longer that night. I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad, but one of my parents had a work dinner event thing to go to. So both my parents were going straight there after work, and they would be gone until that night at about 9 or 10 o'clock. And they told me this beforehand and left me money to order a pizza to have it delivered if I wanted. So I was kind of excited for that. I was also excited to be able to just watch TV and play video games all night, or at least until my parents got back. After arriving home from school, I went directly up to my room and started gaming. Eventually, I went downstairs and hung out there for a while. Then when I got hungry, I ordered pizza. I would guess at around 7 o'clock that night, the pizza guy arrived. I answered the door, got the pizza, paid him, and then went up to my room. I started eating pizza and playing video games, which was a dream night for me back then. However, about an hour into this, and I heard the main front door to our house open downstairs. It surprised me right away, because other than my video games and the TV on a low volume downstairs, the house was completely quiet. At first, I thought that it had to be my parents, obviously, but two things were off. Number one, my parents were not supposed to be back this early, and if they were, they probably would have texted me. Number two, I didn't hear them unlock the door. It had simply just opened. As I was thinking these thoughts, I listened and heard somebody now walking into the house, although I could not hear very well being upstairs and in my bedroom. I thought back to when I had picked up the pizza from the delivery driver. That's when I realized that I thought I forgot to lock the front door. I think I just got the pizza and then went back inside and closed the door but didn't lock it. I felt terribly nervous now because I couldn't honestly remember locking it. Meanwhile, I heard footsteps downstairs going closer towards the staircase. I thought about yelling, asking if it was one of my parents, but decided not to. I also thought about trying to yell something threatening or fight whoever was in the house if it was not my parents. But I had no fighting skills. I was a skinny 14-year-old kid and didn't have anything really to use as a weapon either. Now the footsteps had reached the stairs and they were starting to walk up. I got even more nervous. As whoever was in the house was walking up the stairs, I sat there in my gaming chair basically frozen with fear. My bedroom was the second door on the left once you got up the staircase to the second floor, and my door was not closed all the way, it was open about a foot. After the person reached the top of the stairs, I finally had the thought to close my door, but I felt like it was too late, so I didn't. My door had no lock, and the person would see me closing it, giving me away if I did. So what could I do? I couldn't really think of anything. I looked to the door, and the way the door opened was opposite where the person was, so even though they were now in the upstairs hallway, I couldn't see them and they couldn't see me. They continued walking closer at a slow but steady pace. I was still sitting in my chair. I'm not sure if I was just frozen with fear and too scared to move, or if I didn't move because I knew I would make a sound, because obviously I wanted to hide under my bed or in the closet, anywhere that would be out of sight from this person if they chose to enter my room. But moving now would make too much sound. However, the one thing that I did have going for me was that the lights in my bedroom were off. I liked gaming in the dark. I should also mention that I had paused my game shortly after hearing the door open and the person enter the house, so that wasn't making any sound. The only noise I heard was the footsteps and the very low volume of the TV downstairs in the living room. The person walked right in front of my doorway. Then, for a moment, I saw somebody come into my view in the open crack of the door. I looked away out of fear. I was sure that the person would open the door the rest of the way, and who knows what would happen. But it didn't. I heard the footsteps moving away. I looked back over and now saw nobody there. The footsteps were now going back down the stairs. Whoever it was leaving, and they were also walking a little bit faster. Eventually, they reached the bottom of the stairs and then went towards the front door. Then they left. When I heard the door close, I ran downstairs and locked it. I looked out the windows but didn't see anyone. They must have gone out of sight. I didn't see any strange cars or anything. It was really weird. I then called my parents, who came home. Whoever had entered the house, though, was long gone. Nothing was stolen or out of place, and I never got a good look at them. I think that it was a man based on the little I saw, but that's just a guess. Overall, I have no idea why this person entered our house. Did they know that the door was unlocked? And what did they want inside? After that, I did not want to stay home alone for a while, but I did. I would have to stay at home after school while my parents were at work, but I didn't stay home alone at night for a while after that. This happened not that long ago. It's something that's really crazy, and I'm sure that I will never forget. So it was a normal night, and I was relaxing on the couch watching a movie. For some background, I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. I used to have a roommate, but she moved out after the lease ended. However, I decided to renew the lease and just live there by myself because I could afford it. I didn't feel like moving all my stuff to another unit, and I decided to just use the extra room as my office, as well as some extra space to store all my stuff. The apartment is on the 3rd floor of the building, which was built in 2018. On this day, I had gone to work like normal, went to the gym, and then came home. I hadn't left after that. So there I was, sitting on the couch, watching a movie. It was getting to be pretty late at night. Out of nowhere, I heard the sound of things falling down coming from the other room. It sounded like from my office, possibly inside the closet in there, but there was also a chance that it could have been from the hallway or from another person's apartment. It happened pretty fast, and the sound lasted for a total of maybe 2 seconds. Instantly, I was nervous, but I told myself that I was just being scared for no reason. I wanted to go look, but was too scared to. Other than the living room, all the lights were off in my apartment. I didn't hear any other noises, so I figured there was just stuff falling over. I did have a good amount of junk in the closet. I didn't know why it would just randomly fall though, but it was definitely a possibility. I procrastinated going to look and kept watching the movie. However, I was getting more and more creeped out, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep that night unless I went and confirmed that nothing was there. It might sound crazy, and I certainly thought that it was, but I still felt paranoid. What on earth could it be other than just junk falling though? So I decided to go and look. I psyched myself up and then walked over to the office. I turned on the light in the hallway and then turned on the light to the office. At first, everything seemed fine. I didn't hear any noises or see anything. Then I walked in and went to the closet. The door was closed. It was a pretty large closet, nothing crazy, but you could easily walk in. When I opened the closet door, it was dark in there, but I instantly saw a man. As soon as I did, I just took off running. I could not believe it, and everything I did next was just a reaction. I ran to my front door and left my apartment. Thank God I still had my phone on me. I ran out into the hallways and called the police. I told them some guy was in my apartment. Then I walked around the hallways in a daze until they arrived. I was freaking out because I honestly did not expect that at all. When the police arrived, they entered my apartment. Surprisingly, the man was still in there. He was arrested, and I had never seen him before. He would not say how he got in or why he was there. I'm just glad that he was gone. But I never did find out how he got in. I mean, it makes no sense. My place is on the 3rd floor, and the only entrance is the door. I must have somehow forgot to lock it or something. Maybe the lock is broken. I really don't know. What I also don't know is how long he was in there for. I'm going to be creeped out about this for a long time. I'm just glad that I didn't get hurt or anything. I used to like power outages because it was fun as a kid having the whole house dark and only using flashlights and candles and such. That changed one night 3 years ago. It was late October, a little after 11 p.m. I was home alone because my roommate was visiting her parents. I had worked a long shift, so I went to bed early. I remember scrolling on my phone until my eyes felt heavy. I must have fallen asleep around 10:30 p.m. About an hour later, I woke up for no clear reason. I glanced at my alarm clock and saw the numbers were dark. The power was out. I reached over to look for my phone on the nightstand, but the charger light wasn't on. My phone had been at 2% when I went to bed, if I remembered right, and it hadn't charged it at all with the power being out. As soon as I opened it and tried to use the flashlight, my phone died on me. My next course of action was to go downstairs, grab a flashlight, and check through the windows if my neighbors still had power. I got out of bed and walked towards the hallway. When I stepped out of my room, I stopped. I stood and listened. I told myself houses make sounds, and I was on edge because the lights were out. Still, I moved quietly and carefully as I made my way slowly towards the stairs. Halfway down, I froze again. This time, I heard a faint click, like metal lightly touching metal. I didn't know what the sound was, but I forced myself to keep moving. At the bottom of the stairs, I peeked my head around the corner towards the kitchen and the back door, which is where the sound had come from when I was standing on the stairs. From where I was, I could see the back door was closed, but the small curtains over the window were moving slightly. Even though it was dark, from my spot, I could also see the deadbolt on the back door was unlocked. I always lock it every night. It was a habit that had been drilled into me since childhood. I couldn't see most of the kitchen from where I was looking around the corner, only about a fourth of it that contained the area with the back door, but I knew someone was inside my house. I didn't know where the intruder was, but I decided to take a risk, and I bolted through the living room and out the front door and into the yard. I didn't even stop to put shoes on. I jumped over the small fence and ran to my neighbor's house, banging their door until they opened it. Oddly enough, my neighbor's power was still working. The police came and searched through my house. They found a small cut in the power box outside, like someone had cut the main cable. They found muddy prints in the kitchen, hallway, and near the stairs, but they didn't find the person. Nothing was stolen and nothing was broken. Whoever had walked into the house in the dark slipped away when I ran. With the intruder cutting the power to my house and then not breaking or taking anything, it felt like some sort of personal attack to me. For months after, I slept with a light on and even bought a gun to keep near me at night, just in case that same intruder ever thinks of trying again whatever they were planning. One night over a couple years ago, I was asleep in bed with my girlfriend of 2 years. I was woken up in the night, however, and the time was probably sometime between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., as my girlfriend and I at that time in our lives went to bed a bit past midnight every night. I awoke to the sound of screaming coming from outside the house, deep in the neighborhood. To describe the scream as detailed as possible, it was a woman's scream, but it didn't sound like one of distress. It sounded like rage or insanity. It wasn't a high shriek, it was powerful, like a true horror movie scream. I heard this scream, and it sounded like it was 2 or 3 blocks behind us, but still within distance. With it sounding like that, I was locked in bed with fear. I probably could have moved, but most of all, I was really trying to read the scream. I locked up to absorb it all, trying to get any sense of distress. But there was none. It was a wild wail. The scream was continuous, with short breaks of no more than 3 seconds. As I was listening to this scream, I heard it start to get closer and closer, as if it were coming towards my girlfriend's house. The houses in her neighborhood all had large backyards that were spacious, with not many fences, and I could tell that the scream was running through the neighborhood. It seemed fast, too. I had a bad instinct about it, and I just knew it was going to end up at my girlfriend's house. At that point, it sounded like it was down the street by about a dozen houses. It was also at this point when my girlfriend woke up. She was immediately worried and asked me if I was awake. As she was asking me this, like I said, I heard the scream approaching our direction. I had no doubt in my mind because the scream was getting louder. In that moment, it just felt like a nightmare, one where you try so hard to escape or hide that someone's chasing you, but you can't get away. My answer to my girlfriend was short, because I felt this thing approaching us as if it was going straight for us, and I wanted to be silent when it was near us. So we were both awake now, quiet and listening. At the same time, the scream went from those dozen houses or so down to next door. It was then that the screaming stopped and it had a short break. Still undoubtedly moving though. As I was anticipating the scream to start again, or some crazy lady to beat on the window, I then heard grass crunching from right outside my girlfriend's window. That was why I wanted us to stay quiet. I knew this would somehow happen. It felt like maybe 5 or 10 seconds where it was maybe waiting outside the window or slowly creeping past it. Then it started back up a couple houses down, into the distance on its same pace. My girlfriend and I were so relieved, but also then and still now disturbed and confused. We were grateful that we could talk again, and I can't remember if we went back to bed or not. The whole thing lasted only about 5 minutes. I still have no understanding or predictions of what exactly that was or why it happened. I really don't know what it was. Was it a person? Could a woman do that? I've also watched a few videos of animal screams native to my area, and just in general, but nothing comes close. I knew it was going to be next to me somehow also, and there was literally a single window between us within a minute of me theorizing such. I've seen videos of different animals, and even people insanely screaming when I've searched for an answer, but nothing sounds even close to the power this scream held. It was truly terrible. I wish I knew the neighbors better, and I could ask anybody if they had outdoor cameras, so I could have gotten peace of mind. I of course have already pitched the theory to myself and wonder if it was a prankster or a junkie. But the motive behind that scream wasn't brainless, senseless, or playful, and I don't know how many other ways to describe it other than that. This is something that happened not too long ago. I live alone in a smaller house that I'm renting. It's in what I would describe as a pretty average neighborhood. I've lived here for a little over a year and have gotten used to things. So one night it was getting late and I was about to go to bed. The time was about 10 o'clock and I went upstairs to where my bedroom is. All the lights in the house were off and I literally just crawled into bed to sleep. But before I could close my eyes though, I heard a knock at my front door. This was instantly weird. Why would somebody be at the door so late at night? I didn't know. So I got up out of bed, annoyed, and walked down the stairs and then went over to the front door. It took a little while to get down there obviously, but when I did, there was nobody there. I was confused and looked out the window into my front yard, driveway, and the street. There was nobody in sight, so I figured that either whoever knocked had lost patience waiting for me pretty quick, or else maybe it was a prank. Possibly some kids playing ding-dong ditch. I was annoyed by the whole thing, but I went up to my bedroom to finally go to sleep now. However, literally as soon as I was about to get into bed again, there was more knocking at the front door. At this point, I was convinced that it had to be a prank, The timing seemed too perfect. So I sprinted downstairs and then went over to the front door again. Once more, they were gone. Whoever had knocked was nowhere in sight. This time I decided to wait around for a bit and see if whoever was there would return. So I stayed by the window but tried to keep myself hidden. As I waited, I was expecting to see someone return to my property, probably some teenage kid or something, but nobody came back. I stayed there watching for like 15 minutes and then decided to go to sleep. I figured that they would not come back, and I went up and went to bed. This time I was actually able to fall asleep. However, I was woken up in the night. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and as soon as I awoke, I heard the sound of someone banging on my front door. Not just knocking like it was before, but this time it was like the person was trying to knock my door down. And it wasn't just one steady set of knocking, it was almost constant banging. I got up out of bed, and this time felt nervous to go down and see who was there based on the loud bangs. But still, I went down the stairs to look. When I was just about at the bottom of the stairs, they stopped, and by the time I got there, once again, the person was gone. There was nobody there. I stayed by the window and looked around. I could not believe how I kept missing this person, whoever they were. As I stayed there though, about a minute later, I saw a car slowly drive by down my street. It was a pretty average-looking sedan, and there was nothing that stood out about it. Plus, I could not see anything about the driver because of it being nighttime and dark out. But the car drove by really slow and then was out of sight. And my street is normally very quiet, especially at that time of night, so I think that was the person who was knocking on my door, but obviously I can't confirm that. After that, I stayed by the window a little while longer, and then eventually went back upstairs and went to sleep. I was not woken up again that night by knocking or anything, and the next day things were fine. That was a few weeks ago, and nothing strange has happened since, but I still have many questions about that. Who was knocking on my door, and why? It was so crazy how I kept missing them and never saw who did it. It's like they knew when I was going downstairs, and maybe they could hear me with it being so late, I'm not sure. But I'm wondering if that car that drove by was in fact the culprit. I'm hoping that it was just somebody pulling a prank on me and it's an innocent joke. But the fact that they knocked twice at 10 o'clock and then came back 4 hours later at 2 a.m. is really creepy. Plus, the way they were banging on my door that last time was really bad, and I seriously wondered if they were trying to break in. I'm wondering if this person will come back. I'm hoping not, but I will keep you posted. Back when I was in high school, I lived at home with my parents and siblings. However, one night, my brother and my sister were over at their friends' houses. I had friends too, but I wasn't hanging out with them on this night. My parents went out with their friends as well, so I was all alone at home for the occasion. I was a freshman at the time, and was too young to drive, unlike my 2 older siblings. I had stayed at home alone several times before, and I enjoyed it. It was nice to have the entire house to myself for a change, and usually I would just play video games though. So on this night, I remember that's what I was doing. I was up in my bedroom and playing on my PlayStation. My bedroom, along with everybody else's, was on the second floor of the house. The way my room was situated was that it was at the back side of the house and had a window that overlooked our backyard. In my room, the bed was against the wall, and then across from it was my desk and my TV. Then in the corner was my closet, which was next to the window. So I was in there just gaming, and at one point, probably around 9 p.m., I'd been doing that for hours. I would randomly glance outside every now and then for no particular reason. One time when I looked outside, I saw something. I rolled my gaming chair over a little ways to see what was in the yard. When I did, I realized that there was somebody just standing in the middle of our backyard wearing this creepy clown mask, and this person was looking right up at me. They wore normal clothes of a sweatshirt and jeans, but the clown mask went completely over the person's head, had long hair, and looked really scary. I instantly was freaked out, and I reached around and found my cell phone on the desk. I was ready to call 911 if anything happened. I tried to remember if all the doors were locked downstairs, and I thought that they were. I didn't want to go back to the window, but decided to carefully look. I went to the floor and ducked down. Then I looked over to the window and saw the clown man still standing there. He was still looking up at me. My windows had no cover, I remember. I used to have blinds, but they broke from me playing basketball in my room, so now I had nothing. Being on the second floor overlooking the backyard, I didn't mind, but now this was a problem. I turned my bedroom lights off and then decided to go downstairs and make sure that the doors were locked. I left my bedroom and then went downstairs. When I got to the front door, I saw that it was in fact locked. Then I carefully got to the back and saw that one was locked as well. So at that point, I went back up to my bedroom. When I got there though, the clown was now gone. I was so relieved to see that he had left. I went around the house and covered every window except for my own and the other bedroom ones. I also looked out of all the windows before covering them to see if the clown was still anywhere in sight. Thankfully, he was not. About an hour later, my parents and siblings returned home. I told them about the clown, and they figured that it was just someone joking around. So later that night, my parents went to bed. I stayed up late playing video games because it was a weekend, and I didn't have school the next day. So it was probably after midnight, and I remember that I saw the clown again. He was once more standing in around the same spot as before and looking up at me. I was super creeped out now. I wanted to tell my parents, so I left my bedroom and went out into the hallway, but everyone had gone to bed, and I didn't want to wake them up. My siblings' doors were also closed, and all the lights were off. I debated waking everybody up, but I also didn't want to seem like a wimp, so I went back into my bedroom and decided to watch the clown and see what he would do. He stood there just a little while longer. Now, my bedroom lights were off and had been for a while, but then the clown started waving at me. I was so creeped out that I ran and found a random blanket and then just ran back to the window and covered it. I held it there in place for a while and then went around and found some tape in my room and taped the blanket to the wall. I didn't want to look out there. I stayed up for a little while longer, too scared to go to bed. Finally, I looked again and the clown was now gone. After that, I was able to go to sleep. But that experience with the clown really freaked me out. It's still something that I think about sometimes. I wonder who that was and why they chose to go to our backyard and look in my bedroom window. This happened 2 years ago. There was a normal day on the weekend and I happened to be home alone. I went about my business as usual and planned on just chilling and watching some movies for the night. I was used to being home alone, so I wasn't afraid at all. After all, I took precautions every time, and nothing remotely suspicious happened until then. At one point, I went on a walk as usual at midday. I usually have my headphones in, and at first I didn't notice that somebody was following me, but in the corner of my eye I caught a glimpse of what seemed to be a silhouette that was matching my footsteps. The person was walking alongside me on the other side of the pavement, synchronizing their movements with mine while watching me. I gathered the courage to face the person. There was an ordinary-looking man, seemingly in his 40s. There was nothing odd, creepy, or unusual about him besides the look on his face, which was emotionless, stiff, and haunting somehow. I could only bear to look at him a few seconds, as his glance was really unsettling. I continued walking while turning off my music player to be more aware of my surroundings. I kept my headphones in, though, as I didn't want to tip him off that something was wrong. Out of the blue, he turned and started walking towards me. My heart was pounding, but I didn't stop walking. He got close and then said something to me. He asked how my mother was doing. Even though a creeping sensation was taking over me at the bizarre question as I didn't know him, I took my headphones out and asked him to repeat. He repeated the question, and I said my mom was fine and asked him how he knew her since I had never seen him before. He evaded the question and said that he hoped her and my grandparents solved their family issues, which couldn't have been known about since our family keeps their business private, especially from strangers. I was really nervous as I refused to respond and avoided eye contact with him. I couldn't make out his features very well since I was determined not to look him straight in the face, and I walked faster, taking a different route back to my house. I looked behind once again and saw him in the same spot, but now he was smiling and it was creepy. Every inch of my body told me to run, but I refrained, thinking that he would be excited by this challenge of chasing me down. I got home and sent my mom a message providing this guy's description to see if she knew him. She didn't reply, but somehow I managed to calm down by the end of the day. I watched some movies like I had planned, and by the time I went to bed, I almost forgot about the strange occurrence from earlier. That was until I was awakened by a knock at the door to my flat. I was sleeping in the living room, so I heard it right away. I checked my phone, and it was 4 a.m. An unsettling sensation creeped into me as I was gathering the courage to go and look through the peephole. Then there was a knock again. I finally got up and pulled away the cover off my peephole. There was that same strange man from earlier, his head very close to the peephole. I cannot describe what a grotesque sight that was. He could see me watching him and smiled. I could make out his features better this time. He had piercing blue eyes, black greasy hair, and a hooked nose. The best words to describe his face expression are creepy and disturbing, as his large smile didn't go up to his eyes and his teeth were really clean and white. He also seemed to be well dressed. He didn't strike me as a homeless man at all. Me observing him took about 2 seconds, and then he started waving at me while quietly giggling. That sound and the hand gesture pushed me over the edge. My heart sank, and I instinctively pulled away from the door. I grabbed a knife that was in the kitchen, as I didn't own a bat, pepper spray, or a taser. I was walking towards the farthest spot in my house from the entrance when I heard the most horrifying sound. He was trying the door repeatedly and pushed hard on it many times, hoping that it would break free from the lock. When I heard this, I called the police and explained the situation in a quiet voice. They said they would send someone. A good 20 minutes later, I was holding the kitchen knife still in anticipation without daring to look out the peephole again. I knew this guy was still standing at my door. I could hear him breathing, and he would try to push or kick the door again every few minutes or so. When the sirens emerged in the distance, I let out a sigh of relief. As they came, the guy was nowhere to be found. I didn't hear him leave, so he must have slipped away quietly. The police questioned me, and I provided the man's description to them. In the morning, my mom responded and said that she did not know anybody who matched the description of the man that I had described to her. I told her what happened and offered a better description of the man. She still had no clue. 2 years have passed since then, and no other occurrences have happened. I don't know exactly what his intentions were, or how he knew about my family, but I was paranoid for a while. Last year, I lived in Oregon for the year. I don't live there anymore because I changed companies. I moved into a house about 20 minutes outside of Portland. The area was pretty nice and I enjoyed it, but just my third night living there, somebody tried breaking into my house. I was setting up a TV stand in my bedroom when I heard some noises coming from the other side of the house. I started to walk over, wondering what it was. I made my way out of my bedroom through the hallway and near the dining room. When I was walking over to the dining room, I heard the back door open. I was not expecting that. I backed up a few steps, and I briefly heard footsteps in my house, and then they turned around and left, and I heard the door open and close again. I went over to my side window and looked outside. I saw a man walking away at a pretty fast speed, but as he was walking away, I got a really good look at his face. He was about average height and had dark brown, kind of messy hair. I went over to my back door and locked it. I'm not really sure how the guy got in, but next I called the police. They came out to my house, but the man was long gone by then. I gave a description and all the information that I could, but it really wasn't much to go on. I was hoping that the police would be able to find whoever had done it, but after they left, I didn't feel too confident. I just didn't really feel like I gave them enough information, and the man would probably be long gone by now. I was a little bit concerned that whoever the guy was would be back. A few days later, I was outside doing some yard work. I was pretty close to the street, and I noticed somebody was walking down it in my direction. Beyond that, I didn't pay much attention because I was focused on what I was doing. When the man walking down the street reached me, he did not walk past, but he stopped where I was and said hi. I turned around and saw the guy. It was the same man who had broken into my house. He was smiling now and asked me if I had just moved in here. I tried to act normal and I said yes. He was really friendly and said that he lived just down the street. We talked for maybe a minute, but I wasn't able to keep the conversation going very well for obvious reasons. I'm not sure if he picked up on it or not that I had seen him. I really don't think that he thought I had seen him at all. Why would he go over to me if he did? After we talked, he walked away. I went back to the police after that and told them the information. It turned out that the guy did in fact live on my street, but he denied it, and the police had no solid evidence, so I couldn't really do anything. I did install a security camera at my front and back doors. However, nothing else strange happened. I don't live there anymore, and I'm glad that I don't have to live near that guy. I still wonder why he was trying to break into my house, though. Something really weird happened a while back. I was at home one night in my apartment. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but I think that it was kind of late. I just remember hearing my phone vibrating a ways away from me, and I went over to look. When I did, I saw that I was getting a call, but it was from a random number that I didn't know. It was strange because normally the toll-free calls and telemarketers would be during the day. Out of curiosity, I decided to answer the phone. I'm not really sure why looking back, but I did. When I picked up, I said hello. There was at first just silence on the other end. I said hello again a few seconds later. Then, finally, someone spoke. A man on the other end finally said, "I guess I have the wrong number." I said, "Okay." Then he hung up. I figured that it was an innocent mistake of him just dialing wrong. I didn't think too much of it. The whole thing was a little bit weird, but nothing to be suspicious about. The very next night, it was a similar situation, and I was home by myself, as I live alone in my apartment. This time, I know that it was really late. In fact, I was just about to go to bed, but my phone started ringing again. I had remembered the call from the night before. When I looked, it was once more a number that I didn't have saved. It very well could have been the same number from the previous night, but I didn't definitively recognize it at the time. I answered again and said hello. Once more, there was at first silence, but then I heard a man say hello. I recognized the voice, and it was the same guy from yesterday. I said something like, "Oh, it's you again." I then asked him who he was trying to call. I was wondering who my number was getting confused with. But the guy didn't answer me. Instead, he just asked me what my name was. I gave him my first name, and then he said okay, and then just hung up. I was really confused. The whole thing was pretty strange. I mean, why would he call me again if it was the wrong number? Wouldn't he have learned from his mistake? Not too long after this, I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and saw that I had about 10 missed calls on my cell phone. This was really weird. I looked, and they were all from that same number. Why did this guy keep calling me? I also saw that he left one voicemail. Out of curiosity, I decided to play it. When I did, the first thing that I heard was a man breathing. It sounded like he was moving around, maybe walking or something. His breathing into the phone continued for about 10 or 15 seconds, but he didn't say anything. Then I suddenly heard the sound of glass breaking. It was really loud, like he shattered a window or something like that. The voicemail then abruptly ended. When I heard this, I was super creeped out. Right then and there, I blocked the number. My apartment was fine. He didn't break the windows there because I was on the 5th floor, but nevertheless, I looked around and made sure that everything was fine, which it was. The building was fine too, so I'm not sure what glass he broke. Since then, I haven't heard from the guy. I have received no more strange calls. However, I still wonder who that guy was and what he was doing. This happened many years ago. I was much younger and a single man living on my own. I was out with a friend one night watching the game at a bar. I remember that he had to leave early for whatever reason, so I stayed there by myself because I wanted to see the end of the game. I was sitting at the bar, and towards the end of it, I noticed a woman sitting a few seats down. The bar had not really been that busy. I didn't notice when exactly she got there, but I don't think she was there for the whole game. There were other people around. The bar wasn't dead, but it was not super busy either. The woman seemed to be there by herself, and she was just sitting at the bar drinking something. I found her to be attractive, so I was actually thinking of striking up a conversation with her, but she spoke to me first. She looked over and asked if I had bet money on the game. Admittedly, I had bet the over on the score, and I told her that. We got to talking a little bit, maybe like 20 minutes, and before I knew it, the game was over. I thought that it was a good conversation, and shortly after the game, the woman said that she was going to leave. I decided to ask her for her number, and when I did, without hesitation, she said that I could have it. She told me the number, and then I put it in my phone, and she left. I was feeling good about how things had gone. When I talked to her, I was funny, she was laughing, I asked her questions, and she had asked me questions. It seemed like a really good conversation in my opinion. I was excited to hopefully see her again and text with her. The next day, I did something out of character. I was feeling bold, so I decided to call her instead of just text. The way our conversation had gone, I figured that she would not mind. So I called her number sometime in the late morning. She picked up, and I heard nothing on the other end. So I spoke. I said, "Hello," and I was literally starting to say something else when the phone call just ended. It was like she had hung up. My heart sank. Then, moments later, I got a text. It said, "Who are you?" I replied with my name and said, "We met last night, remember?" In my mind, there was still a sliver of hope in this moment, and I was hanging on to it, even if that sounds pathetic. She texted back saying, "Huh?" Again, my heart sank. I thought to myself, how would she not remember me? I had spoken to her for a long time, and I knew she wasn't drunk. Sure, both of us had had drinks, but I only had 2 the whole night, and I can confirm that she did not even seem drunk at all. So I decided to try to clear things up by calling her again. I felt that I could explain the situation better over speaking and not texting, so I dialed her back. This time she picked up again, except it was not the girl that I had met at the bar. It was some random guy, and he sounded angry. Obviously I couldn't see the guy, but he sounded large and had a sort of deep and booming voice. Right away he was angry. I thought for a moment maybe he was the woman's husband or boyfriend. He asked who I was and why I kept bothering him, and asked if I was trying to prank him. He said all this without letting me speak. When he was finally done yelling at me, I told him that I had met a girl at a bar last night and she gave me this number. He started yelling at me again, saying that that was the most unbelievable thing he ever heard and that he will not be harassed and he ought to call the cops on me. Then he said, matter of fact, I should come down and find you and beat you myself. I didn't know why this guy was so angry. I asked him if he knew the woman, and he said no, once more going on an angry rant. This guy was one of the angriest people I've ever spoken to. So what? I called the wrong number. Is that like the crime of the century? I told him I was sorry and I had the wrong number, and I said I really didn't mean to bother him. He started ranting again, saying I had better leave him alone now. I hung up at that point, cutting him off from another one of his rants. I double-checked the number that I dialed with the number the girl gave me. It was the same. So either she intentionally gave me the wrong number or I wrote it down wrong. Part of me wanted to believe that I just wrote it down wrong, but deep down, I knew the truth. She had given me the wrong number, but it didn't end there. The guy who I called by accident then started texting me. He started spamming me with threatening messages. He was saying how I harassed him and how he was going to find me and hunt me down and get me. After like the 10th text in the span of 2 or 3 minutes, I blocked him. And after that, I didn't get any more of those texts. I went back to the bar a few times over the next several months. I didn't want to see the woman again, but if I did, I was planning to talk to her about giving me the wrong number. However, I never saw her again. I'm still kind of mad about it, but it happens, I guess.